This obelisk looks like it's Egyptian a little bit. Is outside of Santa Maria Sopra de Minerva Church. Again, I want to look closely at this. It's a very small obelisk, if it is Egyptian. This is apparently one of the few, if not the only, Gothic cathedral in Rome. This is a little known statue of Michelangelo's. This is the famous Pantheon, and this portico, if you will, is called the Umbrella of Rome because it's where people gather under bad weather. These columns, stolen from Egypt, are single blocks of stone, which is very rare. It's interesting to imagine what this would look like if all the pieces were present. Certainly, this is the back end of the Pantheon. It'd be interesting to know what this looked like when all of these little pieces that are here were fully developed, and when those hints of arches that we see on the walls and buttresses were fully in place. CGI could recreate all of this, and probably someone has. I wonder what all those archways were for. Were they archways? Were they windows? Are they structural elements? Front of the Pantheon with another obelisk stone from Egypt, topped by Christianity, topped only physically. I'm guessing that the column tops are Roman. Here a large half-domed niche, and you wonder what it once contained. Here a pilaster-like column. One of the benefits of the telephoto, I can get up there and look at something I can't make out right now. It may do well with the camera. These huge bronze doors are original. Feet wide and high. What made it remarkable was at the end of the Dark Ages, there had not been such a dome built for 1,000 years, since the end of the Roman Empire. Brunelleschi visited here in probably early 1400s, maybe 1405 or 7 or 10 or something, during a period of time when he and Donatello were missing in the history from Florence. And Brunelleschi essayed this and then determined how to build the dome for St. Mark's in Florence, which was the first time that such a dome had been built of that magnitude. Interestingly enough, Brunelleschi was given permission to cut into this dome, right through this hole, to determine its structure and design as well as he could. What in good part made this dome possible, of course, was the Romans' invention of and use of cement, a much lighter material. Plus, as you notice, structurally, those panels are not solid. They are reduced in size as each square goes in, so there's less mass up there. If you notice, the people are kept away by these barricades of rope because it's all water in there, because that big hole up on top is exactly what it's always been, and that's a hole. Now, the highest part of the dome, ironically, is made out of pumice. Pumice, as you know, is that almost sponge-like stone that women may use to remove dead skin. But it's very, very light.
Noch der Adventfeier erst.
I wonder if those arches that we see embedded in the outside walls are somehow related to the construction of these half domes in what are, for lack of a better term, in Christian church chapels. Now, these interior columns appear to be made of two pieces, the juncture being right there, but I'm not sure that that's the case, because it looks like some of the either fracture lines or natural lines in the stone continue right on up. And at that juncture, in between the flutes, there is an angled, decorative angle inward. So these may be from Egypt also, I just don't know. If they are, that in itself is an incredible achievement to bring all of these from Egypt. Well, here I am at the Victor Emmanuel Monument, a colossus. Some consider ugly. There are various funny names that the Romans have for it. The last time I was here, I remember having to run down those steps and get across here to jump on a tour bus to take us back. Here it looks like some kind of extensive excavations going on, and then another column similar to Trajan's. I'm at that column again, and beneath me is another old Roman structure. Some of it appears to be in the process of being restored. These columns, the parts that are original, of course, are the are the marble columns, and then the brick is used to fill it in to create finished ones. Notice that there are some remnants that are fluted. Those outlines that are square perhaps are an attempt to define some of the space use inside of this area. But suffice it to say that it would have been an impressively large structure. And look what's behind it. How long have those buildings been there? And this architectural structure, or set of, or history of, roams all the way down through here. And when I have more time, I'll come back to this area and hopefully be able to decipher what this place is. How old this tile work is, I don't know. It doesn't look that old. But notice the size of these rooms. Certainly must have held some unique function. All this looks new tile. I mean, last century. A protected excavation area. Notice the little archway there. Notice that there's a building or a room or walls within an arch, circular area. Again, the thing about Rome is that the depth of its history is so great and so intense. The further I pan down, it just seems more and more remains of ancient structures. Here as I approach the Colosseum, all around me are ruins that I cannot identify that go back to Rome. There's the Colosseum in the center there. Clearly we're looking at some kind of a magnificent temple there. Here we can see layers of history. Notice that there an earlier arch has been filled in, apparently. Chunks of beautiful columns lay like the debris they are. Here they're sorted out on the ground, perhaps by archaeologists, in the hope that some generation in the future will come back to reassemble this. Actually, some remains here that can actually be looked at. And here a relief. What's interesting is here there appears to be bedrock. And yet, over here it goes deeper. So did they chop out when they needed to? Presumably. I'm near the Colosseum and some other structure, which if I had the time to look at the map in the rain I would. What's interesting here to me is this niche arch, if you will, and the work on the ceiling. I haven't seen that before. And here a picture of the Colosseum. Just imagine it when it was pure. Just look at the movie Gladiator to see it. This is the Colosseum Metro, and it has double sides, one for one direction, one for the other direction. First view from outside of the Basilica on what almost could be a nice day. At least the sun is shining. It's the first time in almost 3.5 weeks. This is Octavian, Via Octavian, which runs from the metro, stops straight down to St. Peter's. Enjoying my breakfast of tomato. We're about to enter the estate of God. This is the round centered entry courtyard that you see in the map. I'm going to run the camera here so you can get a little sense of a column, because here the sense of column is overwhelming. If you look closely, you'll notice that these are made out of segments, sometimes segments within segments. Here's some square columns. All of this done presumably for the glory of God, or in my parentheses, the Pope who had control at the time and the power to do this. To me, these edifices, whether they're done by government, done by the church, are an expression of the ego of the power at the moment. In other words, in this case, the Pope at the moment. When you say aggrandize God, you legally have to put their names in parentheses immediately after, or just use a dash. I believe it's from that balcony up there that the Pope gives his Wednesday morning audience to the billions. Pretty fountain. And these screens are so that people can actually see the Pope. It's a network or maze, if you will, of entry rails. Imagine if, given this dimension, it were at the airport. You get an idea of the size of the crowds that show up here during the summer. Fortunately, it's not summer. It's the low season, and there are very few people here. These are, I think, the Suaves, the Pope's military presence. Certainly there are popes, and probably many popes, who do not rise to my level of cynicism. We are now in St. Peter's Basilica, and to summarize Rick Steves' book's enthusiasm, this church is best of world. Apparently in all dimensions. And by that I'm referring literally to size. What would that have been for? Quoting Steve's guidebook, this atrium entry area is bigger than most churches. These doors on the right won't be opened until 2025, what's called the Jubilee year. But they are very much reminiscent of Ghiberti's doors on the baptistry at the Duomo in Florence. Don't know who did this work. It looks pretty simple. Evidencing one scene in particular without much variation. I'm guessing very much medieval, of course. And these huge columns in the center, which look like they're all one piece, date from the 4th century BC. Another set of doors. Notice in this panel down here, St. Peter. I think it was St. Peter who was crucified upside down. It's interesting that in sculpture, and perhaps in relief, three-dimensional was quite well understood. It was in the painting that it was not understood. These doors probably represent great moments in papal history. And now, standing at the far end, the west end, always, of the church, And my first impression was, wow. I'll try just to pan around with the camera and give you a sense of what's here. Even with the video at wide angle, I have to do it in sweeps. It's hard to appreciate the size of this. It's so huge. Don't really have much to compare it to unless you try to use the human beings here. But these columns, as opposed to most churches, which columns would be about a fourth at the largest, maybe a fifth or sixth of these. And I believe it's this round purple porphyry stone that Steve Rick's book refers to as the point at which Charlemagne was crowned. Remember, Charlemagne was, I believe, the head of what became known as a Carolingian era, and was, in fact, the First Reich, of which Hitler's was the third. According to Steve Ricks, this church can hold 60,000 people. Michelangelo had envisioned this church to be half the length that it is, but it was made large during the Baroque era in order to accommodate the huge crowds they expected to have.